I don't want to die. I want to live to my old age. I love life. I love living. In order for me to have that control, I need to accept that possibility of death. My name is George King, also known as the Shard Climber, and this is my story. When I was younger, I was really curious about fear, and I test myself by climbing up trees and then jumping out of the trees. I didn't necessarily want to climb the trees or jump out, but that feeling of apprehension, I then sort of took that on to climbing up onto the school roof and then climbing onto cranes and climbing onto buildings. I was never satisfied by it, and I guess the sort of driving force was this curiosity towards fear. A really poignant memory was when I first climbed a climbing wall without rope. I was around 10 years old, 9 to 10 years old. I was totally alone, and it was around sort of 7 to 8 meters high. I remember getting halfway and freezing. I had this panic where I started to almost hyperventilate, my vision started to get blurry. But after sort of composing myself and focusing on my breathing, I then managed to finish climbing up that wall. And when I got to the top of the wall, I was hit with a feeling which I'd never felt before. This overwhelming sense of euphoria, bliss, almost like a supernatural feeling. When I was younger, I was obsessed with this idea of wanting to do something big. And I'd have this big list of dreams. I'd have almost 200 different dreams, and most of them were totally unrealistic. And then at the age of 13, I was on this school art trip going from Oxford to London, sitting in the back of the bus, looking out the window, when I saw the Shard for the first time. It was alone from all the other buildings in London. It was futuristic in look, almost as if it'd been taken from the future and put into the present. And impulsively, I put it down on my list of dreams. Dream 202, climb the Shard. And by the time I was 18 and I'd left school, I went on that mission to achieve that big thing. And I spent sort of 6 to 8 months preparing intensely and training intensely. It was my entire existence was the Shard. I sort of sacrificed social life, I sacrificed family life, I sacrificed everything. Anything which didn't have to do with the Shard, I sacrificed for around 6 to 8 months. And I'd do all different kinds of things to prepare. I'd dress up in sports gear and I'd run to the Shard, and I'd notice that the pillars up at the top were the same dimensions as the ones at the bottom. But I couldn't just get a measuring tape and start sort of measuring, otherwise it'd be suspicious. So I'd run to the Shard in sports gear, I'd sort of stretch on a pillar, and as I'm stretching on the pillar, I'd see that the width would go from my wrist to my elbow, then I'd run back home, get a measuring tape, measure from my wrist to my elbow, then I'll get my measurement, and then I'd do this probably around 200 times, each and every time wearing a different disguise to avoid pattern recognition, each time just getting one piece of information, until around 8 months in, intuitively, I felt as though I was ready. The night before, the calm before the storm, simply wasn't calm. I was absolutely terrified. I feared everything. I feared losing my life. I feared losing my freedom. I feared that all the preparation I'd done over the course of the last 8 months would render completely useless. But as time grew closer, the colder I became, and by the time it was around 4:30 in the morning, as I was sort of warming up and stretching and getting the blood flow throughout my body, I felt totally invincible. I trusted in my preparation, I trusted in my training, and with that I exited the hotel, I crossed over Tooley Street, I climbed up onto London Bridge Station roof, I took a suction cup onto another level, sprinted across a roof platform, and then climbed onto the Shard. I didn't wear a camera on my head, I didn't have drones filming in the sky. It wasn't about a film, it wasn't about fame, it was simply about satisfying that childhood need to do something big. And as I got higher and higher, The sirens would grow around London, but I was not paying any attention to it. I was totally locked into the moment. And by the time I got halfway, I remember looking into the window of the Shard and I saw a cleaner. And the cleaner smiled at me, I smiled back. I waved at the cleaner waved back at me. This sort of bizarre synergy, a moment which obviously neither of us would get again. And I took that energy, I climbed with it. And at this point, there was sort of police sort of congregating inside the sort of top terrace bit. And after sort of embracing the moment of being at the top and looking around and sort of feeling the sense of accomplishment, I eventually got inside the building from there. And I was sort of expecting quite a, confrontational response from the authorities, sort of putting hands behind your back, handcuffs on, getting taken away. But I didn't get any of that. It was actually really pleasant. They sort of shook my hand, they said, well done. And within 30 minutes, they let me go. And then after the dust had settled, both emotionally and mentally, I entered into this quite profound state of depression. I no longer had that big dream to chase. And that was quite a poignant message, that it's never just the arrival, it's never just the achievement, because that feeling, it only lasts at most 2 weeks. But the journey, the process towards these dreams, that lasts a lot longer. So I sort of take that with me on any adventure I embark on today. I always knew that prison was a potential outcome of doing this, but after the interaction I had with the police at the top, I didn't really think that it would ever come to that. For 3 months I was sort of enjoying summer, going to sort of festivals and just enjoying being free, but that didn't happen for too long because I had a court case, a sort of civil court case on the 28th of October. And I always knew that prison was a potential outcome of doing this, but after the interaction I had with the police at the top, I didn't really think that it would ever come to that after that interaction. So I remember coming into the courtroom with this quite sort of cocky, young, naive bravado that I just walk in and walk straight back out. But yeah, that wasn't the case at all. I walked in and I immediately felt the weight of the law. I was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment, of which I just took on the chin. I was actually quite excited to have this new adventure. As I said, I had this emptiness after the Shard, like I needed some kind of new challenge, and they'd given me this opportunity to go to prison. I was actually quite thankful, which is strange for most people to think, but for me that was a new adventure. And I was sent to H&P Pentonville, which is a prison in London, and is regarded to be one of the most violent prisons in the country. And it certainly lived up to its name. I saw stabbings on a near daily basis, serious bouts of self-harm, one including a suicide. And it was a really sort of horrific place.
He was sentenced to 6 months in jail. He says prison was tough, but he won't let adversity extinguish his spirit.
I go through this process the night before I climb a difficult building or a difficult base jump where I accept the possibility of death. I'm not preparing myself to die. The probabilities are that I will survive because I've done the preparation, I've done the training. But there's always the unforeseen, there's always that possibility that I could die. So the night before, I accept that possibility. It cleans my mind. It gives me this sense of liberation, this freedom, the meaning for what I'm doing and the feelings it gives me. It's worth taking that risk. My mind is a bit different to other people. Like I need to do these things. Otherwise, I'd go down toxic paths, if it be alcohol, drugs or whatever. It's, these pursuits, they keep me straight. So I have to do them. I don't want to die, I want to live to my old age. I love life, I love living, and I love people, and I want to be around for them. But in order for me to have that control I need to accept that possibility of death. Yes, of course, police have better things to do than arrest me at the top of the building. I get it, I totally understand. But for me, and this may be selfish, but for me, that's not enough of a reason not to do it. I will do strength and conditioning and sort of cardio work, but generally speaking, it's just about doing it. My training is being on the adventures. You can climb on a climbing wall all you like with ropes and colored grades and all this sort of stuff, but that's not really gonna expose the mind to the fear of being in an urban environment, climbing without a rope, with the pressure of the police and the pressure of the public and getting caught. And really, like, my best training is just doing it. I've put my family through hell with what I do, but they do trust me. They know I'm not reckless with it. They know I take precautions. They know I train. They know I'm critical in my analysis of everything.
What do you feel about what your son does?
Well, it's terrifying, but I trust George. I know he plans so well for these climbs, and I don't know when he's going to climb. I only hear afterwards.
I mean, the base jumping more than the climbing scares me the most. Climbing and base jumping go hand in hand because once you climb up something, you need to get down. And for me, that's what sort of ignited the curiosity to learn how to base jump, because whenever I'd reach the top of these buildings, I'd be at the top and I'd think to myself, what if I just jump off? Like, could I just fly off this building? I'd always have this desire to jump when I'd reach the top. And obviously without a parachute, that's suicide, but with a parachute, that's flying. It goes against every human instinct to stand on the top of something high and throw yourself off it. And everything in your heart and mind is telling you not to do this, that this is a bad idea. But you know you made this commitment and you're gonna do it. And when you do it, it's just surreal. For me, it's climbing and base jumping. It is art, it's rebellion, it's freedom, it's therapy. It nourishes the soul. I can't think of a situation which would stop me from climbing other than death and an injury which is completely debilitating. Not a family member, not a girlfriend, not anyone really will stop me from doing what I'm doing. I think even if I had children, I don't think that would be enough to stop me. I would love to climb some mountains. I have interest in that for sure, but there's a lot of the mountains have been climbed. Not all, but most have. Whereas with the buildings, not many people have climbed buildings. So that makes them more special to me. I mean, there's just buildings everywhere. So like, I'm not gonna get bored. My story, my journey my message is not about encouraging people to recreate what I do. If you just turn up and attempt to do what I do without proper preparation or proper training, you'll likely die for sure. My message is more about understanding what your strengths are, understanding what your passions are, and once you find out what that passion is, block out the entire universe and become totally tunnel visioned into that passion. Attach dreams to those passions and do everything possible to achieve those dreams.